Good evening. I'd like to call the August 2015 Davie County Commissioners meeting to order. This time I'll ask Commissioner Jones to lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. Father God, we are blessed. You have blessed us by placing us in this freest of all lands. You've blessed us by instilling a burden in the hearts of men and women to fight in battlefields for freedom and for liberty. Father, you bless us even today by those that work, our law enforcement, our healthcare professionals, Father, our fire professionals, our EMS, Father, that we might be safe and we might truly be free. Father, but most of all, you've blessed us by the unconditional love of your Son, who went to a cross, who died, and who rose again, that we might truly be free. And so, Lord, we thank you and praise you for that tonight. Father, bless this great county and continue to bless this great United States of America. Bring revival to the hearts of men and women, boys and girls, that this nation might turn around and look to the light that you and only you can offer. We praise you and thank you in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Okay, at this time we join Commissioner Poindexter in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. This time we'll look to adopt the agenda. Entertain a motion to do that.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. 5-0. Thank you. Next item is public comment.
Mr. Chairman, we have no one who has signed up for public comment tonight.
Make a note of that. Thank you. All right. Next, we will move to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Okay. Have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. 5-0. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move to the county manager's report. Mr. Ruffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for those of you who are here from Home Health, just to let you know that the consent agenda, the board did approve its declaration of intent to sell Home Health. And I wanted you to know that had happened, and which is what we said to you last week would happen. Tonight, before I leave the office, all of you will be receiving an email, as well as the board and support staff, that will include the RFP, request for proposal, that will go out tomorrow to 11 prospective buyers. So this is just the first milestone. As you know, there are many proposals are scheduled to be open on August the 25th. I will be meeting with you in early to mid-September, as well as with the physical therapy group, to go over what we've learned from the proposal process. Along the line, going to continue to get your input and keep you informed, as I said I would. Again, the patients are coming first. I pledged that to you in the meeting last week and to the physical therapy group as well. And you're a very high priority too. And as we move along, I'll do my very best, as I promised to you, to keep you informed. Okay. So with that, Mr. Chairman, you asked me, and Mark Jones called me and asked about the tag office closing here in Davie County. And I really regret that August 1st was a really hard day, and I understand today was for surrounding counties that have tag offices. Actually, Brian Myers and Robin West have contacted some of those around us to talk a little bit about that process. And one of the things that I think we are surprised, because we were told in a meeting with the town of Knoxville maybe 2.5 months ago that there was negotiations going on with someone to take the place of the then current contractor. And that indeed did happen. Background check cleared, offer was made, and was turned down. And so that's what resulted in the office closing on Friday as its last day. There is a second candidate that is in negotiations. The first phase of that is the background check, and assuming they pass the background check, then it'll be up to the state to make an offer, and then for that candidate to then accept that offer. I asked staff, Robin and Brian, what would happen. 17 counties in North Carolina run tag offices. I was in Georgia for 9 years, and all 159 counties there run their own tag offices. So it's not unusual to see counties throughout the country not just collecting personal and real property taxes, but also collecting taxes on cars and issuing tags. And indeed, Yadkin right around us. I think Alexander, I heard, was one, do it in the area. Robin called Yadkin County. Brian called their tax administrator. They make, if that's a good word, they clear somewhere around $21,000 between fees, notary receipts, taxes paid, over and on top of their expenses. They're making a little, not a lot. They have 2 full-time employees and a part-time employee. They are located in their existing tax office, although it's on another floor from where they collect property taxes, and they say that has worked out great. I think we'd be prepared if this fell through with the present contractor and there are no other prospective contractors that might be interested in taking it. I hate the fact that our citizens are being inconvenienced and have to drive to other counties to get their tags and handle their business. I don't see this as something that's particularly financially threatening to us to take a good hard look at, but then I don't want to step on the toes of a private firm or individual who has hopes of getting that contract. So that's what we know right now. Yadkin collected around $101,000, and they spend about $81,000. So they're about $20,000 above what they spend to run their tag office. So we'll certainly, I think, the wise thing for us to do, if you're okay with this, would be proceed along with our analysis and sort of find out what we'd have to do if that falls through, so that perhaps we could step in, with your permission, bring something back to you, step in and then mobilize as quickly as we can if you want to do that. At this point, I think you need to see the numbers and learn a lot more about it before we move in that direction, but we can certainly put that information together for you in the event this one prospective contractor doesn't pass the background check or doesn't come to a satisfactory negotiation with the state. The other thing I didn't say is the state provides all the computers, all the technology, all the supplies, right, Robin? So there's very little additional cost to the county. There would be some, obviously, but the major costs are borne by the state. So they provide all the supplies, all the computers, and the technology are needed to process the transactions. I think the tricky part, John's just hearing about this, John Gallimore, for the first time right now. The tricky part is integrating all that technology with our technology, meeting all the requirements that would have to be met, asking if there was a way for one technology to serve everything, taxes paid too, for example. So we would work through those kinds of questions over the next month. Does that sound like a plan to sort of put together for you if you need it?
So you think the private candidate will know whether that's a go or not in the next 30 days?
I do. I think they're just waiting on the background check to clear and then make the offer and see if the private candidate accepts it. And there may be someone else out there interested I'm not aware of, but we do know they're negotiating with at least one.
Did the change in the collection of the motor vehicle tax have anything to do with the closing of this one?
I really don't know. I'll yield to Brian or Robin if they have more information on that. I'm not sure I thought this was a contractor who was retiring, and I think that was the influencing factor.
Have they indicated if the private investor does pass the background check, as you say, what the time frame is for this, for him to be?
Brian, did you hear an answer to that question?
Yes, sir. The background check's in its preliminary stage, and it's saying that, they said it typically takes 4 to 6 weeks to get the full background check back. And they said the earliest a tag office in this county would be open at this point in time would be the end of December and the latest beginning of January. That is if everything's cleared with this individual that they're working with.
Yeah, I
No
can-
offers being given yet, that individual, pending the background check.
Yeah, I can told our staff today, they didn't need to know or confirm that Davie had closed. They were slammed. And they're usually slammed on the 1st to 15th and the last day of the month. So this is the 3rd, but they were slammed today, so they'll continue to have a lot more activity in the neighboring offices due to this. If we took it over, obviously, if January is as early as a present contractor could operationalize, I think we're looking probably at March to April for us to get everything done that we need to do. But we'll try to get those questions answered for you if that's something you're interested in. At your September 8th meeting, we should know more and try to get some information to you, share it with you.
I think it would be important to try to serve the citizens of the county with a tax office, whether, if a private industry is not interested in it, I think then the county should definitely take a serious look at it. Particularly since one of the major functions now is collecting the motor vehicle tax.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Ruffin? Okay. Next item on the agenda is old business. Do we have any old business to come before us this evening? Seeing none, we'll move to new business. First item on new business is this is going to be just for information this evening. We plan to take this up hopefully at the September meeting, but tonight is for information, just to have discussion and get input from our engineer of record, Mr. Tyler Highfield, and Johnny Lambert. So at this time, Johnny Lambert's our Director of Water and Public Utilities, and Mr. Highfield is our engineer. So.
Yeah, I just want to introduce Tyler. Tyler's with Highfield Infrastructure. The board requested that we have 3 alternative routes for Eastern Davie Sewer looked at. And as we did, Mr. Highfield went through his study and he come up with a best case scenario and worst case scenario, I guess you'd say, in his analysis. And he is here to show you that, and he has got a PowerPoint for you.
Thank you, Johnny. Chairman and Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to come this evening and give you an overview on the study that we recently wrapped up. I want to start by just talking through a little bit about what we were doing. This was the objectives and the scope of the study. It was to prepare a cost opinion of the 3 options that had been identified in Gray Engineering's technical memo or report from March of this year. We didn't get into a lot of analysis on the background information, so we didn't dig back into flows and do flow projections. And we also didn't get into looking at other alternatives. It was really focused on these 3 alternatives that had been presented and updating or providing our opinion on those costs. So as a refresher, I wanted to walk through what each of those options or alternatives are. The map in the lower left-hand corner is a map directly from Gray Engineering's report, so that may look familiar to you. And then there's a schematic off to the right to lay out what some of the pipe sizes and lengths are as you look at these routes. So option 3.1 is the river force main route. The items shown in blue, are existing infrastructure, so those are existing pump stations and pipelines. We tried to just generally differentiate force mains, which are shown as solid, from your gravity sewer sections, which are shown with dots to represent manholes. So you can see there's a green segment that would, force main that would run from the Yadkin River pump station to a new transfer pump station that's been conceptualized at the Cornatzer property. In this scenario, there's a couple things I'll point out. There's a few pump stations that pump multiple times. So the Rest Stop pump station, the Oak Valley pump station, and the Ashley Farms pump station come to Smith Creek pump station, and from that point under this alternative, they get pumped at Smith Creek, at Yadkin River, and then also at the regional pump station. So that's 3 extra times. This is set up to serve the existing service area and growth within the existing service area. So there'd be no additional area served, just existing customers. The 3.2 option is very similar. Difference being, instead of the force main route running along the river, it would run mostly along DOT roads. So within right-of-ways, minimizing easements and impact to private landowners. In this case, the force main is a little bit longer, and so this plays out to be a little bit more expensive, but generally it's the same concept. One thing I did want to point out is that even though the force main runs down 801, 158 and 801, it does not open up new service area. A force main is not something that can be readily connected to. If somebody were to develop land along 801, they would basically have to build their own pump station and their own force main to get to the regional transfer pump station. So that's 3.2. 3.3 is what's been called the Bermuda Run West pump station alternative. This one's a little more complicated to explain, so I'll try to explain here. There's, starting on the left-hand side of this figure, there would be a new gravity sewer that would run from the Smith Creek pump station south along Smith Creek. That would be a gravity section that would flow into a new pump station that we're referring to as Bermuda Run West. And at that point, it would be picked up and pumped to the regional pump station. The flow that comes into Yadkin River pump station, there's areas that are served that come into the gravity line upstream of Yadkin River pump station. That flow would be reversed. Currently, it pumps from Smith Creek to Yadkin River. So that flow would be reversed. It would go from Yadkin River back towards where the Smith Creek pump station is now. We would reuse a portion of that force main, or that line, the portion that's a force main we would reuse. And so there's a short section there about a mile long that would need to be relayed as force main, and that section flow would be reversed. The Smith Creek pump station would be removed from service. It would no longer operate as a pump station, and that flow would be part of the Smith Creek interceptor and would flow to this Bermuda Run West pump station. One advantage of this alternative is it does reduce some of the times that those pump stations or areas are pumped multiple times. I'm sorry, I didn't say that very well. It reduces the number of times that those 3 pump stations I was telling you about, Rest Stop, Ashley Furniture, and Oak Valley, now they pump into this gravity line and are pumped one less time before their ultimate destination. So that should result in some operational cost savings. There's a lot of pros and cons to these alternatives. So what we try to do is put together a qualitative table to evaluate and compare how each of these ranked. And I'll hit on some of these. One is number of easements. With easements comes land acquisition cost and some disruption to the people that are adjacent to those pipelines that are going in. So 3.1 has a significantly higher number of easements, but all of the alternatives are going to require some easements to get the project constructed. Construction sequencing. 3.3 is the most complex project in terms of sequencing because things have to be done in a certain order. We can't, for example, we can't reverse the flow in the Smith Creek force main until everything from that point downstream is built and operational. So there's a sequence of things that have to be put into place and made operational before the next element can be put into place and made operational. Service area, 3.1 and 3.2 only serve your existing service areas. Again, there's allowances for growth within those service areas, but it doesn't allow to expand the area that's served. 3.3 does open up the area along Smith Creek, sometimes referred to, the town of Bermuda Run has plans to develop a town center, and then there's lands to the west of that also that flow by gravity to Smith Creek. So that's the area that's generally opened up in service area.
Good question quickly.
Yes.
Just real quickly. The 1 and 2, though, you did say indicate they do have built-in room for growth.
Yes, sir. Within the drainage basins that they serve.
Okay, so
Does that
that
make sense?
it's not that they can't be expanded, maybe not in as greatly as option 3.3, but there can be expansion of the system, so to speak.
That's right. You could build other pump stations and force mains that could pump to these stations, and there would be capacity there for it.
Okay.
But they're not set up in a way that you could readily connect to it. In terms of operating costs per volume served, 3.1 is the lowest of the three options. A lot of that's driven by the fact that you would have more customers connected, more people to share the cost. But the bottom line difference is 3.3 is the most expensive alternative, and there's about a $2.3 million difference between those. So
You meant to say 3.3 is the lowest alternative, not 3.1?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, 3.1 is the lowest capital cost alternative. 3.3 is the highest capital cost alternative. Thank you.
Brief question then, and I don't know if it's Robin, whoever, Johnny, you, the difference in the cost of the project. I know there's, you're saying there's indicated less operations cost here, but what would be the time frame that you would recoup the difference in the cost of the project versus the operation costs that you might offset?
Yeah. We've not gotten into life cycle cost analysis, but Johnny.
We've had Ralph tell us look at that, and she's still looking at some of the numbers on to when to recoup the whole total project out. And that's really going to be determined on customers that hook to the system and when that's paid back, because we do charge a capacity fee for new customers that hook up to the system, and that fee being $13 a gallon per gallon one time. And that's gonna affect it, the years.
We haven't, will you have some estimation from her by the time we meet in September, or
Sure, I should
whoever
have
this
some
person
estimation.
is?
She's working on it now. but-
Okay.
We know the capital cost for revenue bond per million, 20 years, 80,000 per million. So if you're talking about 2 million more, you'd be talking about 160,000 more per year about. So 80,000 a million for capital cost difference.
Okay. Thank you.
And then that's what brings us to the recommendation of our technical memo, which was to proceed with 3.3 based on the long-term vision and the lowest long-term operating cost for serving this area. Then just to add on this, that was the three options on the Davie County side. There's also a transfer pump station force main that's part of the project. And so we were asked to step back and also take a look at the budgets that were established for that aspect of the project. And so we did that, and based on that, which is the transfer pump station force main and the option 3.3 of the Davie County side that we just discussed, what you can see here is a comparison of the recommended budgets that we came up with, which is 17 million, compared to the estimate that Gray Engineering came up with in March, which was 14.7 million, which is a difference of 2.3 million. Now, I wanted to hit on a couple things. I think the first question is probably why? Why are these numbers different? I mean, 13% is not necessarily a big gap, but the dollar value is a big dollar value. So there's several things that have gone on. There's market adjustments. The cost of pipe and the cost to get it installed is changing. The good news is our economy is recovering. The bad news is bid prices are going up. We're getting fewer bidders bidding on projects, and some of that is showing up. So we wanted to take that into account. In Forsyth County, there's a change in pipe materials. When the initial estimate was done, it was not understood that Forsyth County required ductile iron pipe, whereas PVC is used more in the county. And so there's a significant difference in those two costs. And so that has a lot to do with the difference. There were, as we looked at the flow,
May I ask you, how much more is ductile iron per foot than PVC? You remember that? I remember an $85.
It depends on the size, and I'm not sure.
What's the
Mr. Ruffin, if
difference
I
in
have-
terms of the ductile iron 6 miles worth on, you remember that number?
I have it, and I can look it up, I think.
I just think it's an important contrast for the board for the 2.3 million. If I remember, it's about 1.4 million.
Yeah, okay, so, when the overall project was figured with ductile iron pipe, it was, that 17 million was 22 million, wasn't it? 22.7 million. So, but that was the entire project being ductile iron.
That was your estimate.
That's right. Those were both our estimates. That was not us versus Gray. That was our estimate as ductile versus our estimate as PVC. So it's, that's a big difference. And these numbers would be much, much bigger if that were the case on the entire project. But the only adjustment here is the section in Forsyth County.
And it's about 6 miles worth.
And it's 33,000 feet, yes, sir. So cost per foot adds, I mean, it adds up quickly. And then I think the fourth thing, these are two different engineers' opinions. We've spent a lot of time talking with John Gray, understanding where his cost came from, trying to make sure that we understood the local environment. He spent a lot of time doing work here and took that into account in our opinion. I think if you had a third engineer, you'd get a third number, and you'd scratch your head as to, now I've got three numbers and I don't know which to believe. To carry that thought process farther, we're evaluating a conceptual plan. So we're looking at a map that's a 8.5 by 11 drawing with a line on a map that says this is a force main. Once we get to final design, we're going to have a set of blueprints that are going to be about that thick, and we're going to have contractors bid it. And if we had 5 bidders bid this, I think the spread's going to be bigger than 13% there as well. And that's going to be on a detailed set of plans. So what you've got is two people's opinion on a plan that's at a very conceptual level. And so I think the numbers are going to be a little bit different, even as we've talked through and tried to get into some details between us and Gray Engineering.
Tyler, can I ask you a frank question?
Yes, sir.
Are your margins different between the other estimate?
By margins.
Your personal margin, is that accounting for some of this differential?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Your
It's a free market question.
your commission, is there a differential in the percentage charge?
Engineering costs.
Yeah.
Is that the
Margin,
cost to do
I say the
engineering.
difference between cost versus.
We were both using 15% for engineering cost. So they're different because our estimate of construction is different, and we're both using the same percentage, but the percentage that we had recommended budgeting was the same.
Quick question too. Am I perceiving this correct, that this is John's current estimate also? You've indicated that that costs have gone up.
Yes, yes.
John's was in March, yours is in July.
Right.
Would it be appropriate for us to deem what his estimate would be?
Well,
It may be higher.
But Tyler, you may want to speak to the process you went through with Mr. Gray subsequent to him presenting his March numbers. I think some of that may have been accounted for.
Okay.
Yeah, so the sequence of things, of course, Gray had done their work in March. We put together some initial numbers and draft technical memos, and they were based on ductile iron pipe. So there was this big gap between Gray engineering numbers and our engineering numbers. We sat down, talked about it, and this is one of the things that came to light. So we went back and refigured all our budgets with PVC pipe, and then
On the Davie side.
on the Davie side, correct, and brought those numbers back as revised numbers. And at that point, or during that process of us revising our numbers to PVC, Johnny asked John Gray to also go back and look at his numbers and bring them up to what he thought was current market value. And so his numbers adjusted as well, but we did not, this is not his updated number. His number, I don't know if I have that with me. Some of his things changed, but his overall number,
Yeah, I mean, there was an overall
Some.
number of about 16.5. That was with Bermuda Run involved in the project after, the 22.7.
It's about 15.8.
Yeah, it went down to about, John's number hit about 15.8 and Tyler's was about 17. There was, the difference in the
Okay.
numbers is some contingencies. There was the pipe difference. John used PVC pipe on Forsyth County's side. Tyler, more familiar with Forsyth County's ordinances, he used ductile.
But John updated that and changed that in his 15.8 number.
Yes.
Okay.
His numbers have been freshened, I think.
Thank you.
So his real number's 15.8, at least for
Yeah.
what we have.
For our
Correct.
consideration.
But since this was a number that this group saw back in March, or when he came, we decided to go back to the same number he
Sure.
had. So
Yeah,
there wouldn't be any
apples to apples
confusion.
here.
Right, that's what we're trying to do.
Sure. So, Tyler, have you made a recommendation?
yeah, our technical memo recommends the option 3.3 to move forward with.
Now, 3.1 is at least capital cost about $2.3 million less.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so from a cost standpoint, 3.1 is more attractive.
As a capital cost, you're right.
Okay.
And that's the difference between those two alternatives, is that capital cost.
And we'll hear about operational cost and how much we'll save and how long it'll take to recoup that difference, right? Johnny?
We can look at that. I mean, to recoup the difference, I think that's gonna be a hard number to.
Well,
kinda
what is
look
the
at.
difference?
To- Between the option one,
Yeah.
1.31, 3.2.
Yeah, I mean, even if we can see, even if we can see just a raw dollar figure in our eyes, we can kind of,
Yeah, what's the operational
yeah.
cost difference?
Okay.
The operational cost difference is involved in pumping, and it will not be that difficult to come up with that number.
Yeah,
I think we can come up with it fairly
Important
easy.
number to know, I think.
Yeah, we can,
So let's just assume then that capital cost is 2.3 million under 3.1, then 3.3. Is the primary reason for recommending 3.3 is to open up new service areas?
We looked at what was the best way to serve this community after we looked at all these alternatives and said, what's the best way long-term to serve this area? And so to serve this area, it's not the cheapest way to do it today, but it's the cheapest way to do it in the long run. If the county's objectives are to construct the least expensive capital cost to serve the community that's served right now, that clearly steers you towards option one. But from a technical perspective, we're trying to back away from the political lines, the town lines, all these things, and just look at it from an engineering perspective. And what we were tasked to do is look at what's the best way to provide sewer service to this community. And this, we think, is the cheapest long-term cost. It's clearly not the cheapest short-term cost.
Well, the reason I ask that is because, and we've had this debate previously to a certain extent, but I think this is one of the underlying philosophical debates that we need to have as a board, and that is, what is the purpose of this sewer initiative? You know, we had a prior plan with a sewer plant that would have opened up the Bailey's Creek Basin, I believe it was, the lower, the southern part of Advance and areas to new sewer, and that was one of the reasons for that proposal. And, you know, conceptually, there's sort of two ways to go with this. One is to serve existing customers and continue to expand business along the corridor where we currently have business. And the other is to open up areas like town center and other potential service areas. And that's legitimate perspective and a legitimate philosophical point. But I think we need, as a board, to have that discussion about what we're looking to accomplish, because it strikes me that if we're looking to, you know, follow the first initiative, which is to serve existing customers in the most efficient way possible and to expand business in the corridors we already are in, then you go with the cheaper alternative. If you're looking to open up town center and other areas, then you'd look for the more expensive but the longer range growth piece of this. Would that be correct?
I think that's a fair assessment. It comes back to what's your fundamental goal and objective. You could probably also look at what if you built 3.1 and then 10 years later you came back and built the western branch of this thing. And we've looked at some of those numbers and to kind of see what's the difference in cost if you do it that way. And if it's a 10 years out, it's probably about a $1.4 million adder over 3.3. So that's kind of what I was trying to describe with short-term versus long-term. If you look short-term, you'd say do 3.1. If you looked long-term, you'd say, well, if we did 3.1, when we come back to do this western leg, we're going to spend something like 1.4 million more than we would have spent on 3.3. And that's where, from an engineering perspective, we've laid it out. But I agree. I think you've got to make a fundamental decision about what's the objective, whether it's short-term existing area or long-term community. And
Right. And the thing about town center, I mean, that may be a perfectly viable approach in terms of opening that up. But I don't know if this board knows what the vision is for the development of that area if sewer were to be expanded in that area, which to me would be an important consideration.
I think there's another consideration that we have to think about as a county, though. We've got the Davie Gardens and the, Creekwood that's up there. That's the area that if we're going to open that up, we've got to deal with bigger pipes. If we go with the 3.1 or the 3.2, we got a different situation where we're pumping down to that pump station at the river. And then we're going to have to worry about increasing that, and we hadn't even put that in any of these numbers. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And let me ask a question on that. And because I think I read this in the summary, would it be the case, per what John's saying, that you'd have to install larger pipes along the Smith Creek Basin and other areas in order to accomplish 3.3 vis-a-vis 3.1 or 3.2?
is this related to serving these
Well,
communities or developments that John was?
No, 3.1, we wouldn't be doing the, any changes in the
piping.
situation going down the,
But what I
Smith
read on,
Creek.
what I read on 3.3 is you'd be installing
Larger pipes, that's
pipes
true,
down
because
Smith Creek.
that opens up the section, let's say, in between 158 and I-40, all going out toward Baltimore Road, that section.
Yeah.
All that section will be opened up. And this Creekwood and Davie Gardens has been some concern for some time, that they may need some. Well, if we're going to do that, we need to put a bigger pipe down through Smith Creek.
Yeah,
That's part of the consideration of all this.
yeah, and that, what I'm reading from is installation of approximately 5,400 linear feet of 8-inch PVC. That would begin at Yadkin River Pump Station, travel within the right-of-way of 158 and connect to the Smith Creek Is that right?
Force
Yeah,
mains.
that takes care of places like Kennerton and what I kind of refer to as the eastern side of 801, going up that way. That, all that's going to end up going down to the Yadkin River Pump Station. And if we put more down there, if all of Oak Valley and Creekwood and all these places have to go down there, we're going to have to put a bigger pipe in at some point in time coming back the other way.
And here's the other one, I guess, installation of approximately 3,600 linear feet of 18-inch PVC gravity interceptor along Smith Creek, the lower end of the Smith Creek interceptor at Highway 158 to the new Bermuda Run pump station, which would be somewhere between the end of Hidden Creek and what's that road? Talwood?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Talwood, so.
Yeah, it would be envisioned to be off the end
So
of
the
Talwood.
conception
yes,
would be to run new piping of this diameter down the existing Smith Creek all the way up to that new pump station. This would be under 3.3.
That's right, up to Smith Creek, where the Smith Creek pump station is now at 801. It would run that stretch of creek right there.
And as John said, you wouldn't, under 3.1 or 3.2, you wouldn't have to run any new lines.
No gravity, no new gravity lines. That's right.
As it relates to that, on your brief schematic, you have, under environmental impacts, you have minimal under 1 and 2, and you have moderate under 3. What,
Tell me,
just,
can you turn that back?
just kind of,
Yeah.
what do you, what's the indication there? Is it the issue of running and sizing out new pipe and,
No, it was the two that are minimal, 3.1 and 3.2, I'll explain. 3.1's the shortest pipeline route, so that's the least impacts. Most of that, there's a little bit of wooded areas that are going to change vegetative use, but most of it's golf course fringe, and it's already cleared. So there's a minimal environmental impact there, very few creek crossings. 3.2, we also have listed as minimum. It's primarily in right-of-ways, which are already cleared and maintained. So again, no significant change in vegetative use at the end. What bumps 3.3 up in our mind is that there'll be some clearing along the creek. And while that's not significant, and it happens on a regular basis, there is some impact to that. I mean, now there's a number of things that are in place to mitigate those. There's buffer requirements from creeks and how close you can put pipeline corridors to creeks, because we want the natural filtering of wooded areas and brushing areas to be in place. But that and the total linear footage is quite a bit more than the other alternatives. So those add. None of this was to create alarm, but it was to differentiate that is one drawback in that category compared to the other.
right?
And Tyler didn't look at this, but we have looked at this in the past, that, Oak Valley Pump Station, it's at capacity now, so depending on the option that you choose, 3.1 and 3.2 will not have any effect on that, but 3.3 will take some of the flow, divert some of the flow off of that Oak Valley Pump Station, so we won't have to go back and upgrade it immediately after 3.1 or 3.2 if you choose to do that. So 3.1 also has the benefits of helping some of the existing system and diverting the flow to get it off.
Okay, hold on.
Or 3.3, I'm sorry.
Did you just, was your implication that you would, and maybe I heard you wrong, that you would have to update that pump station immediately after, if we
If
go
we-
with 3.1 or 3.2?
If anything else ties on or any more development comes into the Oak Valley lift station, yes, it'll have to be upgraded.
That doesn't mean we would do
That
it.
doesn't mean that we would do
A
it.
developer may have to pay for that upgrade.
Okay, all right.
One other point I think we need to make here, there is already a sewer line running from Smith Creek down to this area we're talking about at Bermuda Run West. It just happens to be a force main going the other direction. So we already have right-of-way down through there with a sewer line.
Well, I don't have any other questions. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the chairman giving us 30 days to kind of chew on this a bit. And we'll have other questions, but certainly others may have questions, but I appreciate it.
Okay. I'll speak to this for just a minute while I'm standing here. You know, I think the first, what do we do from here? What's the path forward? The first bullet is what you need to take the time to do, and what I understand you're going to try to do over the next 30 days. Once you get to that point, there's probably some questions like, what's next? Don't we need to get going here? So I at least wanted to speak to that while I'm here. Once we define which of these three alternatives we're going to go with, we can get started with surveying the pipeline corridors for the selected alternative. At the same time, we think it'd be prudent to step back on the East Davie pump station layout and the force main route. And we have some ideas of ways that might be able to be built a little bit cheaper, less expensive. So before we take off producing detailed designs, it'd be prudent to do a little alternatives analysis and dig into that. And then at the same time also proceed with the planning, design, and permitting phases of the wastewater system. So that's kind of how we see it moving forward, but I realize that's a little ahead of the game tonight, but it give you kind of a vision of where we'll go once you're comfortable with part one of the question, which is which option do we want to move forward with.
Mr. Highfield, could you just speak to the, assuming that we make a decision in September, which hopefully we will, the kind of the time frame as you see it to get this solution in place?
Yes, we've done a very preliminary schedule and laid out based on a particular start date, which was somewhat arbitrary to move forward. And what we were figuring, this is also laid out in the technical memo, that it would, the preliminary design, the survey, and the final design would probably be about a 15-month process. Once that's done, there's a permitting step. It's a regulatory permitting. That's usually a 3 to 4 month process. So that gets all your environmental permitting, your encroachment agreements from DOTs, maybe some power line encroachments, things of that order, your creek crossing permits. Then there's a bidding and award phase, which is typically a 3-month period of time. And then construction, right now we're saying 24 months. Given the amount of pipeline you need to put in the ground and the pump stations you need to build and some of the sequencing at which that needs to happen, that's what we're saying right now. We can't just send 5 different crews out there to build all this at the same time and throw the switch the same day. Some of this needs to be built, started up, so the next pump station upstream can be built and started up. And we can certainly overlap those, but those are the timelines, Mr. Chairman, that we've laid out in the memorandum. Since we published this, we've gotten some firmer dates on the agreement with city county utilities, and I do think there's some ways to take that very rough preliminary schedule and remove some of the float time in there, run some tasks in parallel, and shorten the schedule up. So.
So we're looking at early 19 on your early to mid 19, calendar year 19.
We're definitely into 2019.
Yes.
Yes, sir. You remember that date? That's the one we talked about. Middle of 19?
I think that was
It's August, I believe.
Okay. And again, that was a first cut just because people were saying, how long is this going to take? Are we in the ballpark? Can we get it done? So based on, some other similar projects, that's kind of what we laid out.
We're meeting, and this will be helpful for your September meeting. We're meeting later this week with Tyler. We're meeting with Mitch Berguglio. We know we have to borrow the entire amount at one time. We can't serialize it. We don't want to borrow it at the front end. We want to wait, and so we would float some of our expenses up into that point. We need to know what our cash draws need to be so we can look at that against our cash reserves. I think we'll have a really good picture of that for you on September 8th as well.
this question for Mr. Ruffin, as we move through the next 30 days for commissioners, they have questions, do they need to channel that to Johnny or to you, or how do you want?
Free to channel it to Johnny. He'll copy me. If you channel it to me, I'm going to send it to Johnny and copy Tyler. We're going to copy each other. So, and one thing I'd like to do is when we get responses back is to copy all of you so you can sort of see what each other's asking. In case you have some follow-up with that commissioner about it, you'll be able to do that. So
Johnny's
fine as the point man. He'll keep me posted.
Okay, very good.
He's not a very good shooting guard, but he's a pretty good point guard.
Son's a good catcher.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Can we help you in any other way?
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Tyler.
All right. Appreciate that overview, and we'll look forward to studying this issue the next 30 days. Take this up in September, hopefully. Next, we'll move to commissioner comments. Mr. Ferguson.
Well, I would just like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and participating in our meeting. This is the people's business that we deal with every month, and what we try to do is do the best we can to serve each and every one of our citizens. And I know it's difficult sometimes, and we don't always do the things that work out for everyone, but we try to do the best we can. And again, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
Mr. Jones.
I want to concur with Commissioner Ferguson. The one thing I do want to say to our home health folks is when we initiated this process, and I'm certainly speaking for myself now, okay? I'm not promising anything. These were what my thoughts and ideas were as we moved into this. One, that we do not interrupt the services to citizens of Davie County, the people that you serve. Priority one. Second, for me, priority two, that we attempt as best we can to take care within the environment that we're moving towards, that many other counties are doing, is that we take care of our staff. Priority two. Priority three for me is that then we have, even as we move into this transition to the private sector, however you want to define that, is that there be some contact entity still within Davie County. In other words, our citizens should not be calling outside of Davie County. Now, I can't promise that. None of us can. But those were those are three main priorities that I had as we look at this. So I want to tell you all that are still here, that is still mine, and I know the other commissioners' ideas and commitments. And so we thank you for what you do. The environment is just changing, and we want to do the best we can for those that are in need in Davie County. So thank you for being here. You didn't speak, but trust me, we hear you. And so, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Barrett.
I want to echo Mr. Jones's comments. Healthcare is evolving, as we all know, and due to circumstances beyond any of our control, and we're having to adapt as best we can. I think it's critical as we go forward with this process that we identify folks that will do in the private sector what we have done in the public sector previously, that we look after patients. There's going to be opportunities for folks in the healthcare field. It's going to be a different environment for all of us, and we just have to adapt. But I do appreciate your coming out, and you do speak by your presence, so thank you. And I thank all of you who come out and who watch us on TV and participate. Thank you.
Mr. Poindexter.
I too would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's good to see people interested in what's going on in the county. I will agree with what Commissioner Barrett and Commissioner Jones have said to the home health people. You've done a wonderful job. You're continuing to do a wonderful job. We really appreciate that. Unlike the tag office that we were talking about a while ago, where the private industry doesn't necessarily want to get into that business, the home health is totally different. We've had it for all these years, and now the private industry has come in and taken the part away that we were able to provide and at least break even, or in some cases make money on. Now the private industry is doing that. And our concern, like they've said, is to protect our patients, but also to protect our employees. And we're going to try to do the best that we can do to do just exactly that. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. I'd like to, as always, thank everyone for being here. We appreciate seeing the full room or close to the full room. And, as we work with the various departments in the county, I'm continually amazed by the commitment that our employees have, whatever department it is, and home health and the health department is certainly no exception to that. Extremely committed. It was a difficult decision, but certainly all the statements that were made this evening about the thought that went into it, I couldn't really add anything to that. We appreciate you being here this evening. I wish some of the folks had stayed around, but anyway, I'm glad they came as well. But anyway, thank you for being here, and we will see you hopefully in September. Have a good evening. I guess we need to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.